Welcome to the Real Crime Diary, daily dose of crime. I'm Sean Dupree. Today, we're diving into a developing legal battle that's sending shockwaves through the entertainment industry. Music mogul Sean "Diddy" Combs finds himself at the center of a controversial motion that could silence his accusers. His legal team has requested a gag order in a case that's already captured national attention. But should witnesses be prevented from speaking out? Let's unpack this explosive situation and what it means for justice in the spotlight. The federal charges Sean "Diddy" Combs now faces are nothing short of explosive. Prosecutors have leveled serious allegations of racketeering and sex trafficking against the music mogul in the Southern District of New York. These aren't just isolated incidents they're investigating. The government alleges a pattern of criminal behavior spanning years. Despite the gravity of these accusations, Combs has maintained his innocence, entering a not guilty plea to all federal charges. But the federal case is just one part of a much larger legal storm. In civil courts, Combs faces lawsuits from at least 24 individuals who claim he sexually assaulted them. Some of these alleged victims state they were minors when the incidents occurred. The scope of these allegations has grown significantly since the first civil suit was filed. While Combs' legal team has consistently denied all claims of wrongdoing, the sheer number of accusers coming forward has turned this into one of the most closely watched cases in recent memory. Each new lawsuit seems to add another layer to an already complex legal situation that threatens to forever change the legacy of one of hip-hop's most prominent figures. The tension in this case reached new heights when Combs' legal team filed for a gag order following explosive testimony from a key witness. Courtney Burgess had just appeared before a grand jury, and what happened next sent shockwaves through the proceedings. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, Burgess was giving interviews to major news outlets, claiming he had witnessed something extraordinary: 8 separate sex tapes involving Sean Combs and various celebrities. In these media appearances, Burgess painted a disturbing picture. He alleged that 2 of the individuals in these recordings appeared to be underage at the time. Even more troubling, he claimed that all 8 people appeared to be under the influence of substances during these encounters. According to his testimony, every single person in these recordings could be considered a victim. Mark Agnifilo, representing Combs, immediately fired back. In his letter to the judge, he characterized Burgess's claims as not just false, but outrageous. The defense team argued that these public statements were nothing more than an attempt at extortion, suggesting that Burgess and his attorney had previously tried to shop one of these alleged videos around, even attempting to contact one of the celebrities supposedly involved to see if they wanted to purchase it before it went public. This very public battle has raised serious concerns about the possibility of a fair trial. Combs' lawyers argue that allowing witnesses to make such inflammatory statements in the media is creating a circus-like atmosphere that could prejudice potential jurors. They contend that these unverified claims are spreading like wildfire online, making it increasingly difficult to ensure their client receives a fair hearing in court. At the center of the federal case against Sean Combs is Cassie Ventura, identified as victim number 1 in the government's indictment. Her allegations have opened a disturbing window into what prosecutors describe as a pattern of exploitation and abuse spanning several years. According to federal prosecutors, Combs orchestrated what he called freak-offs, elaborate sexual encounters that often lasted for days. These events allegedly involved multiple sex workers and a cocktail of dangerous substances, including ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB. Prosecutors say Combs used these drugs to keep his victims compliant and obedient during these encounters. The allegations took on new weight when surveillance footage emerged showing an incident from 2016. The video, which found its way to CNN, appears to show Combs physically assaulting Cassie in a hotel hallway. This evidence seemingly validated part of her claims about the abuse she endured. While Combs maintains all sexual encounters were consensual, he notably settled Cassie's civil lawsuit just 1 day after she filed it. The speed of this settlement raised eyebrows, especially given the serious nature of her allegations. She claimed Combs had forced her into participating in these freak-offs as part of a larger sex trafficking operation, using a combination of coercion, violence, and threats to maintain control. When victims refused to comply or challenged his authority, prosecutors allege Combs would resort to physical violence, emotional manipulation, and verbal abuse. These tactics, they argue, were designed to ensure participation in these events while maintaining a veil of secrecy around his activities. Douglas Wigdor has launched a forceful opposition to Combs' request for a gag order, pointing out glaring contradictions in the defense's position. In his filing to the court, Wigdor emphasized how such an order would effectively silence victims who are actively pursuing justice through civil channels. What's particularly striking is the apparent double standard at play. While Combs seeks to restrict witness statements, his own family members have been notably vocal in the media. His mother, Janice Combs, publicly characterized the prosecution as a public lynching based on fabricated claims. Meanwhile, Combs' son took to Instagram to describe how these events have impacted their family. Even more telling is the behavior of Combs' own legal team. They've frequently engaged with media outlets, framing the case as racially motivated prosecution targeting a successful black entrepreneur. One of his attorneys even participated in a TMZ documentary about the case, the very type of media exposure they now claim could prejudice potential jurors. The contradictions became even more apparent on Combs' 55th birthday, when he orchestrated what appeared to be a carefully planned public relations move. He held a recorded phone call with his children, which was promptly shared across social media platforms. The timing and nature of this release raised serious questions about the sincerity of his concerns regarding public statements about the case. These actions, Wigdor argues, fundamentally undermine the legitimacy of the gag order request. How can one party seek to silence others while actively engaging in the very behavior they claim threatens the integrity of the judicial process? Let's examine this case from a First Amendment perspective. The request for a gag order faces significant constitutional hurdles, particularly in a high-profile criminal proceeding like this. Courts have consistently upheld that prior restraints on speech require extraordinary justification, and simply wanting to minimize negative publicity rarely meets that threshold. The fundamental issue here is balancing the right to a fair trial against the constitutional guarantee of free speech. While Mr. Combs' concerns about pretrial publicity are understandable, there are less restrictive alternatives available. Courts typically prefer solutions like careful jury selection, clear jury instructions, or even change of venue before considering the dramatic step of restricting speech. We must remember that witness testimony, especially from alleged victims, serves a vital public interest. Silencing these voices could have a chilling effect on others who might come forward with similar claims. This is particularly relevant in cases involving allegations of systematic abuse or misconduct. The Southern District of New York, where this case will be tried, has an enormous jury pool. The notion that it would be impossible to find impartial jurors simply because witnesses have spoken publicly doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Jurors have repeatedly demonstrated their ability to set aside pre-trial publicity and focus solely on evidence presented in court. When we consider the broader implications, granting this gag order could set a concerning precedent. It might empower other high-profile defendants to attempt to silence accusers through legal maneuvers, effectively weaponizing the court system against the very people seeking justice through it. As we've explored today, the battle over free speech in this high-profile case highlights a delicate balance in our justice system. On one side, we have the fundamental right of witnesses and alleged victims to tell their stories. On the other, there's the crucial need to ensure a fair trial. But can justice truly be served when either of these principles is compromised? What's particularly striking is the apparent contradiction in seeking to silence witnesses while engaging in public relations efforts through family members and social media. It raises important questions about equality under the law and who gets to control the narrative in these cases. The outcome of this gag order request could have far-reaching implications for future high-profile cases. Will it set a precedent for how we handle witness testimony in the digital age? Could it affect how future victims come forward with their stories? Think about it. If witnesses can be legally silenced before trial, what message does that send to others who might be considering speaking out about their experiences? And yet, how do we protect the integrity of our judicial process in an age of instant information and viral stories? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Should witnesses in high-profile cases be restricted from sharing their stories publicly? How do we balance the public's right to know with a defendant's right to a fair trial? Share your perspective in the comments, and join us tomorrow for another deep dive into the complex world of criminal justice. Hey listeners, welcome back to The Real Crime Diary. I'm your host, Sean Dupree. If you tuned in last time, we had a deep dive into the disturbing history of power abuse across different eras. looking at the connection between dominance, control, and how it plays out even today. We touched on scandals from the past and compared them with some modern-day examples, showing how these patterns of abuse, unfortunately, persist. One of the most insightful tools we've explored to understand this is my book, Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's not just a historical account, but an interdisciplinary approach to understanding why this keeps happening. We draw from history, philosophy, and modern case studies to explain how figures like Dominique Pellico, Harvey Weinstein, and others have exploited their positions of power for their own gain, often protected by the very systems meant to stop them. Recap of last interaction. In our last live stream, we discussed how libertinism, philosophically introduced by figures like Marquis de Sade, has shaped the way power and pleasure have been entangled throughout history. This concept ties directly into how figures like Weinstein operated, as we saw parallels between de Sade's fictional characters and the way powerful men manipulated their victims in real life. You guys had some amazing comments, asking how societal structures have allowed these behaviors to go unchecked for so long. It's a crucial question, and one that the book addresses deeply. Why this book is valuable. Now, what's powerful about Power, Pleasure, and Pain is its ability to break down these historical patterns and link them to the present. You're not just reading about ancient Rome or Enlightenment philosophy, you're seeing how these ideologies are alive today. The book uncovers how sexual violence and control have been systematically woven into the fabric of societies from ancient times right up to the modern era. It's about understanding not just the individual predators, but the systems that protect them, whether it's in royal courts, religious institutions, or today's corporate and entertainment worlds. Through these historical lenses, we also explore movements like #MeToo that are beginning to dismantle these structures. The fight for justice is far from over, but as the book demonstrates, we are in the midst of a cultural shift where legal reforms are finally addressing these long-standing issues. It's more than a history lesson. It's a guide to understanding and supporting change today. What's next? If you want to dive deeper, I suggest picking up Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's available now, and trust me, it will change the way you think about power, pleasure, and control. We've even got some exclusive content coming up on the channel where we'll be exploring the book's case studies in even more detail, so stay tuned for that. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to The Real Crime Diary so you don't miss any updates. Let's keep this conversation going, because understanding the past is key to changing the future.